Hey, what's up, y'all? This is Jay Miller, 6182. Welcome to Knockers on the Bottom. In my last episode, I did three things that are not as bad as you think. In this episode, I want to touch on three things that are not as good as you think. But first, just want to take a few minutes to go over the Jerry Jones press conference. A lot of things in there. Most of it is straight BS, as we come to typically expect. A couple things that stood out to me was Jerry Jones talking about certain things within the salary cap that that he's not able to afford or that he's not able to necessarily handle. A lot of teams around the NFL, namely Kansas City Chiefs, Buffalo Bills a few years ago, Los Angeles Rams a few years before that, were able to handle some of these same things and put together a winning team that got to the Super Bowl. If you look at the St. Louis, or sorry, Los Angeles Rams, no longer in St. Louis, they were able to handle having Aaron Donald, Matthew Stafford, Jalen Ramsey, and were still able to get to the Super Bowl. Kansas City Chiefs, Chris Jones, when they had Tyrann Mathieu, of course, Patrick Mahomes making his legendary contract extension work. I know not every team has a Patrick Mahomes, but they were still able to get things done. The Buffalo Bills, super high payroll, Von Miller, Stephon Diggs, Josh Allen, along with a host of other people, they were able to, at least win a few playoff games under those big contracts as well. So when I hear Jerry Jones talk about, the woe is me, we don't have enough room under the cap, there are things that I wish I could have that, I can't necessarily have, and those things, it's a smokescreen. What I really wish he would come out and say is, we want Dak to have more success in the playoffs. If Dak doesn't have more success in the playoffs, we will entertain the idea of moving forward without him. If he said something like that, he might garner a little bit more respect, not only from the media, which doesn't mean anything, but from some of the fans, which I think mean everything. The media is going to always find something to be critical about. So you should never make decisions based on what the media says. However, the fan base that has been waiting for almost 30 years for a Super Bowl, they're the important ones. And that's what Jerry Jones should be thinking about. I know there's a strong portion of the fan base that feels like no matter what decisions we make, they're not going to work. And there's no proof to the contrary at this point. But I at least would like to hear him say it. It would show some self awareness, and it honestly make all of us feel a little bit better that he's thinking what we're thinking. And I think he's thinking what we're thinking. But Jerry Jones is always a salesman, so he has to sell us, even if we're not buying. Now, to move on. So the three things that are not as good as you think. Number one, or number three, depending on whatever way you want to look at it, is regular season success. We've gone 12-5 through the last 3 years of Mike McCarthy's tenure. Even during that time, we still haven't been able to find any playoff success. But even if you step back a little further, before the Dak and Mike McCarthy era, we had the 12-4 season with Tony Romo in 2014. We have the famous 2007 season when we lost in the divisional round to the New York Giants, which Wade Phillips tried to call a playoff win simply because we got a first round bye. We even had the season where we went 11-5 and got a first round playoff win against the Philadelphia Eagles, who we had shut out the week before. But then when it came to that Vikings game, we got the doors blown off of us. So just so you know, from my last episode, let you guys know I don't believe the Cowboys are going to have a bad season this year. I think about 9-8, but if the ball bounces a different way in one or two of those games, you might have an 11-win team. If the ball bounces a bad way one or two of those games, you might have a 7-win team. I err more on the side of a winning record, more so than a losing record. Therefore, I don't think the season is necessarily going to be that bad. But I feel like we're always going to falter when it comes to the playoffs. For some reason, I don't know if it's a curse on the team. I don't know if it's preparation. I don't know if it's players feeling themselves a little too much. But we always tend to play our worst football when the stakes are the highest. And I don't see that changing with the current core group as they are. Um, people want to dismiss this offseason and really hammer it home that the Cowboys didn't do much. However, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And at least the Cowboys have done something different this offseason. Whether I agree or disagree, whether I think that it'll ultimately lead to postseason success, remains to be seen. Number two, Micah Parsons. The reason why I say Micah Parsons is we all know he is a transcendent defensive player. He is one of the best defensive players, if not the best defensive player in the game. But for some reason, late in the season, he tends to fade, and in the playoffs, those pressure numbers, those sack numbers seem to get mitigated quite often. It's kind of disappointing to see because of how well he plays in the first 12 to 13 games of the season. I'm of the mind I'd rather Micah Parsons start slow and finish fast. I'd rather see him struggle in the first 2 months of the season and seem to try to figure out what's going on. And then as we get closer to the playoffs, he turns it on, and all of a sudden, he's that dominant force that he is in September, October, and part of November. So I think until he has that postseason success, the jury's still out. Now, the jury's still out in the way of we know he's an awesome player. That will never change. But if he wants to be mentioned in the same breath as Lawrence Taylor, as Aaron Donald, as DeMarcus Ware, as Charles Haley, as some of these other pass rushers that are some of the greatest that we've ever seen, and when we're putting him in the same breath, he has to do it when it matters most. He can't just disappear when the lights get the brightest. And everybody will say, hey, it's the Cowboys. The lights are always the brightest. And to some extent, I agree with that. Every game of the Cowboys regular season seems to feel like it's a playoff game. Everybody gives the Dallas Cowboys their best. So by no means am I saying that he doesn't play well when it's needed. Because every game when the Cowboys play, it's needed. But if you're going to wear that star on the side of your helmet, and you're going to have those seafoam pants and that silver helmet, you're going to have to turn it on even more and find another gear and another level when it matters most. So Micah Parsons is my number two. My number one is the most controversial one, and that's Dak Prescott. Dak Prescott has seemed to get better and better every regular season. Last year, he was runner-up for MVP. Everybody tends to talk about that. He has one of the biggest contracts in the NFL and is looking for an even bigger contract. And honestly, in a vacuum, it would seem that that is a no-brainer. You should sign Dak Prescott. You should sign Micah Parsons, and let's get this thing going. However, whenever the playoffs tend to come around, he seems to falter. Now, not only the playoffs, if we're in the regular season and we're playing an awesome team, if we're playing the 49ers, Miami Dolphins last year, Buffalo Bills, he seems to falter when it matters most. Now, a lot of the Dak fandom will say it's not all Dak's fault. And that's true. It's not all Dak's fault. But he is going to be always the highest paid player on the team. He's going to play the position that matters the most. He's going to play the position that gets the most credit and also the position that gets the most blame. So, as Jerry Jones likes to say, it comes with the dinner. And Dak Prescott needs to be better in the postseason. If we go 12-5 again this year, there are a very small percentage of Cowboys fans that will believe that once late January comes, that Dak Prescott will play his best football. Why? Because it remains to be seen. I've only seen a couple of games, and some of them have been losses. I think back to the Green Bay Packers game where he went down 21-0 in his rookie year, but he brought us back, and it looked like we were going to win the game and possibly have a chance to go to the NFC Championship, and then Aaron Rodgers pulls a fucking rabbit out of the hat. But there are also games like the San Francisco 49ers game, or the San Francisco 49ers game the year after, or the Green Bay Packers game of last year. And if you're going to be a Dak apologist, I understand. He has a lot of numbers to back it up. But it's similar to Tony Romo. And trust me, I am a huge Tony Romo fan. Tony Romo is one of my favorite players in this century for the Cowboys. However, whenever the pressure was on the most, whenever it mattered the most, that's where Tony Romo faltered. Same thing with Dak Prescott. So things that are not as good as you think. Regular season success, Micah Parsons, Dak Prescott. I had some honorable mentions, such as the Dallas Cowboys training staff, which often gets praised. But we've also seen the Michael Gallups of the world have a tough time coming back from a torn ACL. Jabril Cox never quite being the same player after he tore his ACL. Jordan Lewis taking much of the season, sorry guys, last year until he got to his normal self. So it remains to be seen what's going to happen with Demarion Overshown or Stevenson. You know, we want to see those guys progress, but the track record tells us that those guys are probably going to take quite a bit of time to round back into form. So I left that off my list. That was pretty much the only other one that I was going to come up with. As we move forward here in the coming days, I'm going to talk about some running backs that the Cowboys could take a look at that might be available either come cut down time or that are available now via late round pick. I'm also going to talk about maybe some defensive tackle targets that the Cowboys could be looking to acquire at the end of training camp based on what happens with Mozzie Smith and what happens with the draft picks as well as Carl Davis, who I don't think we should expect much there. But, you know, as I go forward, I'll be dropping some episodes talking about that stuff. If anything pops up, CeeDee Lamb signs a contract, Dak Prescott signs a contract, Micah Parsons signs a contract, any trade news, I'll definitely drop an episode and kind of break down that stuff. I'm not always going to be the anonymous, faceless person. Yeah, you'll see me in a few weeks on video as well. Maybe some breakdowns and cut-ups of preseason games and rookies and how they're progressing, as well as some breakdown of practice. The reason I haven't jumped into that much yet is because we're kind of in the underwear Olympics right now. Everybody's in T-shirt and shorts. There's no pads on. So can't really get a feel for how some of the players that really matter to this team are progressing until we get the pads on, until we get some preseason games going. So thank you for tuning in. J Miller 6182. If you like it, subscribe. Comment on the bottom if there's anything that you want me to cover. This has been Knockers on the Bottom. Have a good day. Peace.